Okay. My name is Richard Nielsen, and my wife and I own a company called Life Sprouts. We've been in business for 21 years teaching people how to sprout seeds, and we represent it as the most important item that you can have in a year's supply of food. It's the very first thing you should have there. One of the things that I teach people is that sprouting is the missing link to daily nutrition and home food storage. Some years ago, I did an expo down in Atlanta, Georgia, and I saw about 70 different vendors selling food storage. And the thing that was tough for me to take is that it was very confusing. And on the way home on the airplane, I decided to come up with an emergency survival supply, and I decided, why in a time of need should we just try to get by? Why shouldn't we have the most healthy food that we can have and the most inexpensive when we don't have access to doctors and medicines? Why we need to do something that will be beneficial and keep us in a healthy mode in a time of need. And so I come up with the idea of doing an emergency survival supply. And we started out, and I'll give you the ingredients of that real quick. The first thing that you should have in an emergency supply, and the most important thing, is seeds that will sprout. That's your legumes. And I'll get into that later. The second most important item that you should have is honey. It needs to be raw honey, and you need about 3 gallons for a year's supply. You need 5 6-gallon buckets of wheat. That's the third item. And the fourth item is a source of non-fat dehydrated milk with a whey base. Not that that's the most nutritional, but it opens the arena for thousands and thousands of recipes that you can use for creativeness in a time of need. A bucket of pinto beans and a bucket of hulless oats. And on those 6 items, you can live healthier than people are living right now. And it's very inexpensive. I can't hear when you talk from down there at all up here. It's echoing back. So pinto beans and a bucket of hulless oats. And those are the things that you need for home food storage. And they're very inexpensive to put away. It's not a real costly situation. Now, let's go back and spend some time on the organic sprouting seeds. The first thing we do, we go organic because we found out doing testing at Utah State University that those seeds are complete in the trace minerals, and only when we go organic where they're rotating crops. If they're not rotating crops, then it's just hit and miss as to whether you get the trace minerals. Most every disease that we know of is a lack of one trace mineral or another. So we decided to put in our sprouting mix. The main bulk of it is one called Provitamix, and we put 42 pounds in a year's supply bucket, and then we bury a container this size, a 2-quart of one called Alpha Plus, and that will give a person 1/2 cup of sprouted seed every day for a year, and there'll be a little seed left over. Now, the thing that's interesting about Provitamix, it came about a few years ago when we were looking at seed mixes. I noticed that some seed mixes had 4-day sprouting seed mixed with 2-day sprouting seed, mixed with short shelf life, mixed with long shelf life seeds. And I decided that when we put a mix together, we would have it compatible if we really wanted to have a good mix. So we tested seeds, and we came up with 7 seeds, and we named it Provitamix. And we had no idea at that time what the nutritional background was. And as I researched out seeds, we've quickly learned that all the proteins that we need for our human body and development is in those combinations of seeds. The second thing we found out is all the vitamins are also there. And the third thing we found out was the trace minerals are all there because we were doing organic. And I took a lot of flack on that one, but I did testing at USU and found that I was absolutely right on that situation. About 4 years after we started, I found out one of the most interesting things with this combination of seeds is that it's a complete enzyme structure. There's more than 50 different enzymes, and they're all represented in that mix. Now, our body also creates enzymes in our pancreas and liver. And when we don't eat foods that contain the enzymes, then our body covers for us and creates them. Except there's a problem. When we get in our late 30s and early 40s, our body doesn't function so well to make them. Our hair turns gray and we start to age because we're not getting the proper enzyme structure in our body. When we first put this combination of seeds together, we noticed that it was really tasted good, and we were surprised. And as we dug into it further, I had to put more of others and take some away, and it even made it better. For example, there's one in there called fenugreek, which is this seed right here, which is the oldest known herbal remedy in the recorded history of the world. That's the oldest one. And it's high in iron, but it's also bitter. And so if we put too much in the mix, the bitterness overpowered the other, so we had to tone that one way back so that it tasted good. Another interesting thing is it has peas in the mix. I can get peas that are so starchy that you can't hardly stand to eat them as a sprout. And so variety is very important to what we do with our sprouting mixes. I have to have the most delectful and delightful seeds that I can have in the mix. And so that's where it originated and where it keeps going. Now, my wife and I incorporated this Provitamix into our diet. And we had been using the mix for about 2 weeks, and the flu bug hit town and was really strong. And we have 12 children, and everyone in our family that would say, yuck, ma, not sprouts, got the flu bug. And those of us who were eating the sprouts noticed that we had built an immunity and didn't get the colds and the flus. And so if you want to fortify your immune system, you need to do that now, but why not do it in a time of need when you may not have access to doctors and medicines and things? And so this mix, if you go through one of our shows, of all the products that are available, if I have to narrow it down to one, I always come back to the year's supply bucket of this sprouting mix because it is the very first thing that you put in your food storage. Now let me tell you a little bit how to sprout. When I first started, we picked up the manufacturing rights to the Sprout Master. This was developed over 40 years ago and was just lying dormant. And I got the manufacturing rights, and in 1980 or 98, I bought the molds and we produced them. 40 years ago, this large sprouter that you see here was sold in a health food store with one lid on it for $16.95. And today, with a lot of the middle people cut out of the situation, we mold it here in Utah. It doesn't come from China, and it's produced and sold at a cost of $13.95. So it's $3 cheaper now than it was 40 years ago. And we're finding that a lot of the products that are manufactured in China, they're bringing them back. Now they're raising the prices. Those that mold products are finding that now we can do it here in America again, cheaper than it's done in China. So that's good news. About 8 years ago, well, longer than that, before I had the manufacturing rights and owned the molds, I decided we needed a smaller sprouter as well for 1- and 2-person households. And so I had the molds made for this one. The guy refused to do it for about 2 years because he had done the large one, didn't think you needed a smaller one. And the minute the molds were made for the small sprouter, our sales were exactly equal to the large one overnight. And for a 2-person household, a single sprouter works very well. Now you see it here in packages of 3. And the reason we do that is if you do it right, you need that half a cup you see in every meal. And so you've got 1 sprouter you're eating from, 1 half grown, 1 you've just started, and you keep this constant rotation in your diet. And that makes all the difference. We call it the world's greatest sprouter and crisper. When we started selling it, we added the crisper to it because it's the only sprouting device that you can put in the fridge as a crisper. Now, the keys to good sprouting are aeration and drainage. And if you were here and you could get a close look, there's an 1/8 of an inch crack at the bottom of the sprouter with the lid. And I had the mold people take and change and make it a short rib. I was going to do it on both sides, but we lost the rigidity of the lid, so I could only do it on one side. So when we sprout, we keep the short side up, allowing that air vent underneath. And what that does is it allows our seed to sprout and have good drainage, and where they touch the drip tray on the bottom, they don't mold. Almost all the other devices mold the seed when they come in contact with the drip tray. This one does not. And so it's the most pristine way to sprout. Before this sprouter was invented, there was an old one out there called Garden, now I forget the name, but it was a round tray with a pie-shaped divider in it. And that was the original of this. And then we went to square because you can put it in the refrigerator and it stores easily and everything. The ideal temperature for sprouting, you might want to write this down, is 78 degrees. You can go a plus, minus, or a 5- degrees from that, but you need to have the warmth there, or else it retards the growth and they just don't sprout like they should. So we have a problem in the wintertime. My house is about 55 degrees. It isn't warm enough. Well, we found out that if we take our sprouter and put it in the oven, your oven has insulation all the way around it. Now, you don't turn the oven on, of course, but I can take a glass jar of scalding hot water and sit it in there and shut the door, and it builds that temperature up, and they sprout beautiful in there. In the summertime, we don't have that problem. We take our seeds and soak them for 12 hours, and we do it in a container big enough to accommodate expansion, and some interesting things happen. If there are any weevil larvae or anything like that in your seed, any insect matter, guess what happens? They all float to the top, and when you dump the water off, it all goes away. You rinse the seeds after you've soaked them for 12 hours, night and morning, on a 2-day sprouter, and night and morning on a 4-day sprouting seed. So the end result is you've got the most clean, insect-free type of food you can ever take into your system. If you knew the amount of insect matter that was in the regular loaf of bread that you buy down at the grocery store, it would blow your mind. But our sprouting seed is very pristine when we go that way. And when we come home, like from work at night, and taste our sprouts and they're perfect the way we like them, then we put another lid on top and we just put the unit in the refrigerator, and that retards the growth. If I take the sprouts out of the sprouter and put them in a Tupperware or a plastic bag so I can start another tray going, they sour within the day and they're no good. And so you take them from the tray as you need them, and for that reason you need 3 trays so you can get this rotation going all the time. And it's a very good way to sprout. There's a lot of other devices. There's one that's 3-tiered, and they put water in the top level, wick it from level to level. But somebody forgot that Mother Nature puts in toxins in all the seed coatings. So when a seed is planted in the field, the toxins dissolve into the soil around it, and it prevents weed seed and other seeds from growing in close proximity. And so that's a neat thing to know, that you don't want to eat the toxins. So when you soak the seeds in water, you'll see the waters are real tan colored. And after you've rinsed them for 2 days, the water coming out is just as clean as the water going in, and you've gotten rid of all of those toxins that Mother Nature put in there. It's also interesting to note that seeds that are produced in soils that have too much mineral and they take on too much mineral in the growing season, when you soak them in water, they equalize and give mineral off into the water. Now that's an interesting concept that most people aren't aware of, but it does do that. And so if you want to live healthy, you learn to sprout. In the scriptures, there's references to pulses in the book of Daniel. Pulses are sprouted seed grains. They're not seed grains, but they're sprouted seed grains. And when you take a seed and you sprout it, you expand the nutrients that are in that seed, particularly the vitamin, the protein, up to 600 times in some combinations of seed. And that's nice to have that information. A seed, when you plant it in the soil, produces all of its nutrition before it ever pokes through into the sunlight. The full expansion is done usually within a day and a half or 2 days on most seeds. And during the plant growth, it never produces any more mineral, never produces any more vitamin. It's all done before it pokes through the soil. Seeds thrive on oxygen and give off carbon dioxide. But the minute that sprout pokes through the soil, a reversal takes place, and it begins to take on carbon dioxide and gives off oxygen. And then it begins to extract the trace minerals from the soil. So at the end of the season, that expansion that happened in that sprout and the plant during the growing season deposits in the seed in the plant all the trace vitamin, the protein, and the trace minerals again. It's a very unique system that was created for the use of man. We just have to understand it a little bit better than we've done in the past. How many of you have sprouted before? 1 or 2? One of the worst methods is the jar method because it doesn't have adequate drainage and aeration. And that's predominantly the one that everybody has used. And so very quickly, alfalfa seed became the most prominent sprouting seed in America. And it's been that way for years and years and years because alfalfa will take a little abuse to someone that doesn't know how to sprout very well. With our tray, it's different. All of a sudden, I can sprout all the bean varieties, all the legume varieties that are out there, and get a very delectable, sweet-tasting sprout. Now, this Provitamix, if alfalfa is the most popular, most people think it is, I sell that mix 40 times more often than I sell a jar of alfalfa seed. And this is where your nutrition is. And that's a good thing for you to know, is in that combination of seeds. We live healthier. Everything we do makes a difference. Sprouting seed also is high in the cleansing agents in fiber that cleans your colon and rectal system. So sprouting routinely for years and years, you're going to have a very healthy colon and rectal system, and that works to our advantage. So for those are the reasons, sprouting is the missing link to daily nutrition and our food storage programs, and we need to learn how to use it. You fortify your immune system, you live healthier, and your energy level soars. Now, a lot of people don't know, but the Roman soldiers had a little sprouting device incorporated into their armor, and they sprouted as they marched. And they came in and encamped around a city, and the enemy in the city would say, we won't see these guys for a couple of days. They're all tired. And they would sit down and tank up on sprouts for about 2 hours, and then they'd go down and beat the daylights out of them and capture the city. And that's how they almost conquered the whole known world, is because they used the sprouting energy literally. And we need to look at that. Our athletes would do better if they ate sprouts about 2 hours before a football game or a basketball game. Their energy level goes through the roof. And that's one of the reasons we need to do it. There's a lot of other interesting products that we mentioned. I want to talk just a minute about honey. Raw honey will kill Streptococcus A and B and typhus and botulism all in 12 to 48 hours. It's a natural anesthetizer and kills the pain. And I used to teach, don't put honey in your herbs because it dilutes the effect of the herb. And today we've reversed that. I found an old book called Honey in Your Health, written by an MD out of Cornell University in 1938. Honey is the fastest assimilating liquid known to man. So now I found out that I had to reverse myself, because if you put honey in your herbs, it'll assimilate in 15 and 20 minutes instead of 3 hours. But it also makes the herbs taste better in many cases. And one of those is this fenugreek. And that's why when the tsunami hit over in a couple of years ago, they said that the aftermath, there would be hundreds of thousands of people die. That never happened, because this oldest known herb in recorded history, fenugreek, is a mainstay in their diet. And that's some interesting things that we can take too. I've watched the fenugreek take care of fevers, headaches, sore throat, upset stomach, bladder infection, kidney infection, sinus infection. It works on all those things. You need to keep your liquids up, however, but it's also a diuretic, an expectorant, and a blood cleaner, like alfalfa, because it's a cousin to alfalfa. It's a perennial rather than an annual. And every one that is putting food storage away ought to have some of that on their shelf. Our instructions and catalogs are over there, and you're welcome to those. There's a little recipe on there how to make the fenugreek tea. And I've been doing some messing around with my farm animals when the veterinaries have given up for dead calves. I've been able to bring them back to life and have them jumping around by using a little old herbal knowledge that I have, and it's limited. But again, sprouting is the missing link to our daily nutrition and food storage. It's the most important item that you can do. So I'll end with that, because my time's up. And if we want to live, then we need to start sprouting for life. Thank you.